Generalization effect. Now let's say you have an issue that happened many times to you as a kid, and so you don't know how to get specific about choosing a memory because it happens so many times. That's okay. What happens with tapping is something called the generalization effect. In this case, let's say you had an incident or a memory, but lots of them that were similar. To do this work, just pick one. Pick the strongest one or the most vivid one that's a little more etched in your memory. There are some more advanced ways to work with these, but we'll start with the basic approach. This is very common. We often have these patterns because a similar experience may have happened over and over again. If you can, though, you choose one specific incident or memory from that batch. What's really neat with tapping is that, let's say you had an incident that happened 50 times when you were a kid. Maybe your father criticized you on many occasions. Here's what's cool. If you start to make a list of those incidents, there might have been 10, 20, heck, even 100 incidents. So you pick one and you tap on that all the way through from beginning to end until it gets to a zero charge using the memory processing sheet. It's fine if you can get it to a 1 or 2 or even a 3. If it's an old issue, if there are a lot of things connected, you do your best to get it as low as possible. Don't freak out or stress out if you can't get it down to a 0. There are lots of possible reasons for that. So when you get that down to a nice low number, and then you pick the next memory in that group of memories that is keeping that feeling or pattern in place. If it's a kind of feeling pattern that comes from childhood based on experiences happening repeatedly, then you just keep clearing, and then you pick the next one and you clear that. And after the second one, then you clear the third one. And it may seem daunting when you've got 50 memories that are similar. It may be hard to stay focused on one because of that. But that's okay too. I'm going to tell you that it's highly effective if you can work with the issues this way. Do your best to stay with the thing that you're working on and write down those other things that might come up. If you get distracted and you get pulled somewhere else, just jot it down and go back to it when you're finished working with the item at hand. So now you've cleared the first few and you're moving down your list of memories that are associated with the problem. The feeling behind the issue might not feel like it's budging, because you have all this tangle of memories that are keeping it stuck in place like a big web. In the tapping community, we sometimes refer to this as an issue that's like a table. There's the tabletop, that's the presenting problem with a whole bunch of legs. Maybe every single memory is a leg, so maybe this weird table has like 30 or 50 legs. But as you get the legs out of the way, eventually those issues collapse. A core issue or belief must have experiences to support it or hold it up. The tabletop is basically the general description of the problem. It's the bigger end result label that we put on what we see. For example, a tabletop might be a belief that you are unworthy. The legs of the table that are all specific events that created the thoughts and beliefs and feelings that hold up the tabletop. Maybe you received messages when you were a kid that led you to this belief. That's why it's so important to be specific and search for all the parts and pieces. With tapping, you cut off one leg at a time. Sometimes when you cut off a pivotal one, or enough of the smaller ones, the generalization effect kicks in and more come down at once. When you've cleared enough of the legs supporting the problem, the entire tabletop collapses, even if you haven't cleared every single leg. Don't worry if it seems like there are like a gazillion legs. The fabulous thing that I'm trying to get at here with the generalization effect is that it's extremely rare that you have to go through all 50 memories. What happens is that the whole issue collapses after a certain amount of similar or connected memories are cleared or cleaned through tapping. The magic number might be 3, or it might be 10, or it could even be 15, but eventually the tabletop falls. Usually this happens long before you have to address every single one. Another metaphor that's used in the tapping world is taking down a forest. I don't like the idea of taking a forest down, but it is not a bad metaphor. As you take one tree down at a time, what happens is that eventually the entire forest falls. The issue is wiped out. You basically don't need to do all of them because they are connected. Once you clear enough of them, and for every person and for every issue, it will be a unique amount of specifics that need to be cleared. It also depends if there are other issues connected with it. Some memories contain more than one limiting belief. Something may have happened over and over that made you believe that you're stupid and or incompetent or that you don't have value or some other big limiting core belief. So when this happens, which is not uncommon in childhood, these issues do get tangled. which is why it's sometimes more complicated to fully clear it. But the generalization effect does still happen, which is awesome news. What that means is that when you're working on clearing a specific issue, sometimes you're working on more than one issue at once without even trying, which is a total added bonus. The great thing is that issues really do collapse, and then whatever that problem was can become a non issue without having to clear every single incident or memory that's connected to it. I get really excited about the generalization effect because it's a form of natural efficiency. Here's an example. The general issue is I feel totally stressed at work. This may actually be caused by a bunch of factors like I feel overwhelmed at work, everything feels like an emergency from my boss, I always feel behind, I hate my job. Using the DIY tapping system, you would choose one of those factors as step 1 on the DIY tapping worksheet and then break them down even more. For example, step 1, I feel overwhelmed at work. Step 2, and we'll make step 2 A, B, C, D, E. We'll just break that down. It seems there aren't enough hours in the day for me to finish my work, or I dread getting up and having to go to work on weekdays. 2C, I feel anxious most of the day. 2D, my stomach hurts when I'm at work. 2E, I can't seem to concentrate when I have something important to do. And 2F, I just feel unhappy when I'm there. As you begin to work through each sub-issue, something interesting usually starts to happen. Let's say you choose to work on the statement 2B, I dread getting up and having to go to work on weekdays. You go through the worksheet and you tap on it until the feeling behind it is gone and it does not feel intense or true. When you go back and measure the intensity of the other statements, it's very common for the intensity rating for these to also reduce. If there are related sub-issues, clearing 2 or 3 may even collapse the entire issue. It's quite likely that you'll not need to clear every single one. That's the beauty of the generalization effect.